Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Paradigm Shifters, and I'm Nico Anna Jean. And today I am so pleased that I have a very special guest. We have Kanon Kubose, who is my friend and colleague. He is part of the leadership team at the Bright Dawn Institute of Oneness Buddhism. And today we are just going to talk about how we are shifting the paradigm in Buddhism and how he sees Bright Dawn Center for Oneness Buddhism moving into the future. So thank you for being with me today, Kanon. I'm really happy to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, and I also wanted to mention that not only is Kanon my friend, and he's also a Bright Dawn colleague, he's also the son of my sensei, the late Reverend Koyo Kubose, who passed away last year. And so this is also really special for me to be able to talk with you today as well.
Yeah, thank you.
So why don't we just start, first of all, Kanon, would you tell us a little bit about the background of the Bright Dawn Institute?
Okay. Well, it was founded by my father, Reverend Koyo. Because he really wanted to carry on my grandfather's work, who way back in, before the war, World War II, his teacher, Haya Akagarasu from Japan, um, kind of gave him his life's work, which was to establish a uniquely American Buddhism, so not just a transplanted Japanese or Chinese or Tibetan Buddhism, something for Americans. And so my grandfather established a temple in Chicago dedicated to that. His roots are in the Higashi Honganji Jodo Shinshu sect, but Bright Dawn is non-sectarian. Because, starting with my grandfather and then my father, it's about everyday language. It's also about kind of like a more horizontal hierarchy rather than vertical. So like instead of like a strong leader, which kind of traditionally that's how Buddhism has been taught, it's more like a sangha of students, peers almost. Some people might know more, they might have been around longer and can help more, but it's really about sharing, and learning and growing together.
Yeah, like I like what you say about like it's like peers and instead of an authoritative sort of model.
Yeah, I think that really appeals to Americans, the individual spirit. A lot of people and then also a lot of people are turned off by organized religion and the hierarchy and stuff. So it's just, and it sometimes it even gets, especially my dad was kind of irreverent, with his hand puppets and humor and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, and then but just I think mostly just the everyday language, like my grandfather's books, Everyday Suchness, kind of brings things down to earth, and then so people can really understand it, because there's a lot of misunderstandings in Buddhism, like the void, what is that? Or selflessness, no self. I'm what? So I'm not supposed to have a self. Or and then people can get high and mighty. It's like, oh, I have no self. So it kind of, you know, it kind of helps undo all that. And what is it really about? What are the teachings really trying to teach us, and how to help us? So that's what Bright Dawn's trying to do.
Mm. Yeah, that's interesting too about like because you mentioned Jodo Shinshu, which not everyone that's listening to this knows what Jodo Shinshu is. So I'll just mention that, you know, Jodo Shinshu is a kind of Pure Land Buddhism, and there's different sects of Jodo Shinshu, but that's actually my background that I was in before I came to Bright Dawn, which was Jodo Shinshu, and that's how I met your father. But I'm interested, like, in your take on kind of, can you talk more about this model, which I feel like is pretty Japanese as far as that kind of authoritative model versus this more American model.
Yeah, so my grandfather and his teacher, they were all Jodo Shinshu ministers. But when Jodo Shinshu came to America, they kind of modeled the service after Christian services. So it'd be like a Sunday service. There would be like a Sunday school for kids. During the service, there would be singing, a singing part, a talk lecture part. So that, you know, so Bright Dawn doesn't have a congregation like that. A lot of it is about preserving my grandfather's books, you know, making sure they stay in print. But then my father started what he calls the lay minister program. So it's like a 2-year program, you know, so you're reading all the books and, you know, learning about basically the universal Buddhist principles that way. And so, you know, with that foundation, that helps you in your own practice, and then you can help others too. So that's what Bright Dawn is kind of like that kind of became like the flagship activity that Bright Dawn does. And now I'm trying to bring it kind of into the modern age too. That we're going to keep that definitely, but maybe also a lot more online stuff, you know, social media, short videos, getting things out that way. Because, you know, I think that goes along with, you know, the whole Bright Dawn mission, you know, bringing it to regular people, you know, so people, you know, every day you're looking at your phone, scrolling through your feed, and, you know, it's really nice for, you know, a little inspiring messages to go by, you know, and that might help spread things. People find out more, and we'll expand the lay minister program, hopefully to be really good.
Yeah. So like, then what's the old paradigm? And then like, what's the new paradigm? Can you kind of compare the two here?
Well, so Jodo Shinshu, the Pure Land Buddhism, in Japan, it evolved to become almost very similar to Christianity in that the main practice is something sort of like a prayer. Yeah, I don't think they use that word, but, you know, you recite the Nembutsu, Namu Amidawatsu. You put your hands together and Namu Amidawatsu, and that's placing your faith in Amida Buddha,
Right.
who's kind of a celestial godlike being who created the Pure Land. And after you die, you go there. You know, so in Japan, that became very popular, which I think was good for Japan. You know, the founder of Japanese Jodo Shinshu, Shinran Shonin, you know, he brought Buddhism to the people.
Right.
I mean, before that, you kind of had to, you know, maybe become a monk or intellectually, you know, so you had to be kind of affluent, so you had time to like meditate a lot and study the sutras and all that. But he brought it to the people that way. But that probably would not appeal to Americans or Westerners in general. So, so my grandfather kind of really de-emphasized that, and went back to the kind of the roots of Buddhism. And he even incorporated Zen, which I heard was somewhat controversial, that the Jodo Shinshu temple would also be doing Zen, But I think Zen really appeals to a lot of people. So it's a really good practice.
Yeah.
Uh, so in terms of the practice, it's about learning about the actual underlying principles in Buddhism. So, like, for example, impermanence or oneness, non-duality, gratitude and compassion, all those things you can cultivate in your everyday life. And there's nothing about pure land and after you die or any of that kind of stuff. So even though that's our roots, um, my grandfather really de-emphasized it. So growing up, what I learned was Buddhism was very different. And then so when I grew up and started meeting other Pure Land Buddhists, I was like, what is this? This is so strange, But so that's just how much my grandfather really focused on what he really thought would Americans would resonate with.
Mm. That's interesting too, that it was controversial that maybe there was a Zen aspect to him, in the temple of the Jodo Shinshu temple being sort of controversial, because at now, like, that doesn't seem controversial, right? That's kind of like not a big deal. But then you talk about like Shinran Shonin and like Honen Shonin, his teacher. I mean, they were like revolutionaries, and some of them were executed, if not exiled. Shinran Shonin was exiled, right? For just trying to give regular people access to that practice of Nembutsu. So if you could imagine now, like, that doesn't seem like a big deal to us, but back then it was like worth being executed over.
Yeah, yeah. And also my grandfather's teacher, Haya Akagarasu, and his teacher, Manshi Kiyozawa, they both had problems with the headquarters, the Jodo Shinshu headquarters in Japan.
Mm,
Even
yeah.
though they were recognized as leaders too. It was like, well, but why are you being such a renegade? But that's important. If in your heart uh changes really need to be made, like important things are being lost or de-emphasized, to bring that back. And so yeah, that's hopefully Bright Dawn will continue that and keep the teachings alive, you know and vibrant, not just dead philosophy, which happens a lot of the time, or misguided practices sometimes happen.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people that think Buddhism is about being non-attached. And
Mhm.
so that's just a recipe for suppressing your emotions. That's not healthy. But a lot of people think that's what Buddhism is.
Totally. Yes. I'm so glad you brought that up, because I was actually going to ask you. That's like a great segue, because I was going to ask you next, kind of like, can you talk a little bit about like how you see spiritual bypass as being a problem in spiritual communities, and like how do we combat that? How do we bring like true healing practices into our spiritual life and not get like into this idea of like bypassing this actual work we have to do, our inner work, that kind of idea. Like how do we do that? Do you want to speak about that?
Yeah. So yeah, spiritual bypass it's pretty common. Um, Unfortunately, it's kind of the people will start to go to a spiritual school, you know, maybe initially even hope, wanting to grow, but then instead falling into a pattern of using it in the wrong way to think, oh, I'm past all my problems. Um, so uh and then traditionally Buddhist schools kind of don't seem to, at least not directly, address that. Um, there's probably a lot of reasons for that. Maybe one is just it might be the person's path to be that way. That's just where they naturally go and went initially, and then they'll progress.
Mhm.
Um, but what I noticed, like well, a lot of my training is in Zen. So in the Zen school, uh, just by doing the Zen training, you're supposed to kind of transcend. You don't heal them. So the traumas that you carry might still be there. And they might even in Zen masters, they might be coming out, but because of your training, you transcended them so that maybe they come out, but then they're instantly forgotten. Um, you're just getting a little more non-attached to your issues, even though they're still there. Um, But I had one teacher, his name was Everett Ogawa, um, who he did Zen body therapy. His teacher was William Lay. William Lay studied with both Ida Rolf and Mosh Feldenkrais, and he incorporated the kind of the energy healing that the abbot in at the headquarters Zen temple, Chozenji in Hawaii, uh, did. I think he might have learned it not through Zen, but through his martial arts training. He had like he could heal with energy and
Yeah.
stuff like that. So William Lay combined all three of those. And so like in the Zen body therapy, it's kind of like rolfing, but with working with the body, kind of like a very painful massage, it releases emotion. And so you're working on your emotion that way. And so I feel that's like an integral part that should really be brought into Buddhism more. I kind of suspect maybe in the past, with community, things were different in the past. That people had families, stronger families, and community. It maybe it wasn't as important, but these days I think it's really important for people to actually work on their issues. I mean, it tears families apart, and it kind of seems almost impossible to fix. Um, a lot of times, well, some people might do psychotherapy,
Hmm.
but I think these days we're developing better methods, like EFT, inner child work, all that stuff. And so I've studied a bunch of different modalities for that, and I think it's really helpful. Once you can let go of your issues, it becomes easier to let go of your ego, all the small self stuff that you're hanging on to that keep you small, keep you from expanding and identifying with larger and larger, like until like all of humanity. And that's where how compassion just naturally comes out.
Hmm. Yeah, I was just thinking about this the other day too, about, a lot of people talk about self-love and self-compassion. And I think that when it comes to like trauma survivors, a lot of trauma survivors, whatever that trauma is, they don't even know what that means. Like, what does that even mean to have self-love or self-compassion? What I've come to understand just through doing the inner child work on my own and like with all my clients is that true self-love is actually being able to love that part of yourself, that child, that wounded inner child part of yourself, that if you can't have compassion for that part of yourself and love that part of yourself unconditionally, then you really can't have it at all for anyone else or for the world. So yeah, I found that like that for me has been such an integral part of my spiritual growth is understanding that part of it and how that is like for me that's like growing up spiritually is when I did the reparenting my inner child and released so much trauma and I felt like now that I'm at a place where I'm like, wow, there's this kind of feeling of like the universe is my parent. Like I'm taken care of. I feel supported by the universe. And I feel like I feel more spiritually mature is what I'm trying to say, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you're less your small self and more connected with everything. It's all part of you. And so of course you're going to care about it. You'll have love for other people, animals, the environment, everything.
Mhm. Yeah. So when we're talking about basically we're talking about, healing the world. Um, how do you see Buddhism being a part of that, like in this new paradigm that we're talking about?
Yeah. For for me, I think it really starts with each person's individual self, you know. If you want to change the world, start with yourself. Because then everything, well, first of all, you're part of the world, but then the more healed and expansive you are, uh, aware of the interconnectedness of everything, uh, not only will your compassion increase, but your understanding of what's right. A lot of people are get extraordinarily convinced that they know what the right thing is, but it's coming from like maybe an intellectual place or their own traumas might be influencing how they think. And so then that's probably led to like all the not just the wars, but the current social crises going on in America. People just can't see, or they get locked into kind of extreme thinking.
Mm-hmm.
But if you work on yourself, you will naturally grow,
Right.
like how you described, with the inner child work, self-love, and then you see the whole world as your parent. you know
Mm.
if you're like that, then you probably wouldn't be going off on these you know destructive pathways. It could be destructive, well-meaning destructive, or just outright, your own traumas are leading to that kind of acting out, anger
Yeah.
or revenge, or get them before they get me, that kind of stuff.
Mm. Yeah, I make a joke a lot about how like if you're looking at the world through the lens that I see it through like the world of the inner child healing, is that I see all these people in the world who are, creating conflicts, wars and political conflicts. And I see it as just like a bunch of wounded inner children like trying to in positions of power with in adult bodies with adult resources and in positions of power, but just like running around like wounded inner children fighting you
Yeah,
know
so hopefully we can all do our part to slowly nudge society and the culture into a healthier direction. Maybe just be an example, and you know, it'll hopefully help things, because the world definitely needs it.
Yes, absolutely. I agree 100%. You know, which is why I'm here doing this work that I do, and making these podcasts, and, you know, putting stuff out, putting out content, because it is a mission. And I think a lot of the people who are listening to this, you know, they're very similar, is that they've got a mission to change the world, to heal themselves and help others heal. And what I want to actually ask you is, like, if you could give them a message, like, because there's probably a lot of people out there, I think, that are kind of spiritual refugees, you know, they're kind of floating around, like maybe they've had some religious trauma, some spiritual trauma, and they're seeking healing, but they also are seeking like a spiritual, like, home or some kind of connection. And what would be your advice to them as far as how can they find that, be sovereign, but still have that like spiritual connection?
I would say keep looking. You know, if you're because a lot of times it can seem like there's nothing out there, but there's a lot you haven't seen. Just from my own life, you know, for a long time I didn't think I would find anything. It just didn't seem like anything would suit me. And then I found it, you know, so just keep looking. And in that, maybe never lose that childlike part of you that is open like that. You know, the beginner's mind is another way it's described. Or being a seeker rather than someone that, you know, finds something and wants someone else to like provide all the answers for them. You know, like you know, a way to live. It's not how you feel, but you know, you can grow beyond. You know, it's comforting, but is that what you really want and need for yourself? You know, so to keep the seeker aspect, and then you'll find it.
Yeah, that's when you find
And,
your.
you know, don't give up. You know, like I think atheism a lot of times is giving up.
Mm,
You know, it's like, well, this is definitely wrong for me. Whatever religion they were raised in, it might have been like too harsh, too authoritarian, and they don't you know believe that exists, right?
mhm.
Um, so then you just think there's nothing, and so you're an atheist and kind of angry, and that you know, is that where you want to stay, or to heal? And then you can finally start to actually grow.
Yeah, totally. I've totally been there. I've totally been there, like what you described, like like when I was younger, like I thought, well, I'm just gonna be an atheist because, you know, because I don't believe in any of this stuff. And that was a stage of growth for me, which I obviously grew out of. But yeah, I love that. Just keep looking. Like, don't quit. Keep going, right? Don't stop
Yeah,
seeking the answers.
yeah. But if you really feel that way, that might be where you should be at that time.
Mm,
I mean, the worst thing to do is to suppress your feelings. So yeah, if you're angry, be angry, but then maybe eventually you'll decide, gee, I don't like being angry. You know, maybe there, and then you might start to find a part of yourself that's like, you know, I think there really is more than this. And then that's what I meant by being a seeker. And then you'll find stuff, whatever it is, whatever works for you.
right. Yeah, and so of course, because with the inner child work, we always give that inner child part of ourselves permission to feel anger. If you feel angry, that's okay. I'm still here for you. I still love you unconditionally, even if you feel angry, right? Go
Yeah.
ahead. then and throw your fit and, you know, scream and shout and pound your fists. It's okay, right? It's all okay.
Right. That's probably what a lot of us needed and didn't get as children.
Absolutely. I think that anger is probably one of the most taboo emotions, at least maybe in this culture. I don't know about all cultures, but it certainly for me been difficult to express anger because of the fact that I think in a lot of with childhood trauma, a lot of times there were very unregulated adults who expressed just unregulated anger, and that felt very dangerous to those children. And then when you grow up, it's like anytime anger's present, like even myself or in others, I get very triggered. I've had a lot to do work around that to allow other people to have their anger. But I think that is part of it, is that, you know, we have to work with the inner child to teach them there's healthy anger and healthy expression of anger, and that we have the right to protect ourselves from other people's anger as well. You know, if it's not comfortable, that we can have boundaries with that too. So it's a very interesting kind of dynamic there.
Yeah. One thing that was kind of an eye-opener for me recently was that if another person is expressing anger, that doesn't automatically mean that they're judging you and saying there's something wrong with you. Because a lot of times in my life, well, especially when I started to train in Zen, they started to like encourage not holding in anger. So then I was working on that and expressing it, but people would just automatically think, one, that there's no such thing as like a little anger. They would react like any amount of anger is just not okay. And then and I didn't really understand that, but just recently I learned that it probably was because they were taking it as in a way that I didn't mean. I didn't mean that they had to well, I think they were going to like the victim abuser place. So they automatically saw me as an abuser who was like demanding things from them, you know, totally disregarding their needs and being punitive. Anger doesn't necessarily mean that. So
Right.
that was a big thing for me to realize.
That is a very huge awareness. Absolutely. I think that's a really great lesson that we can all learn, hopefully, is that other people's anger, you know, is not about us. It's their response to whatever's going on. And as you
Yeah,
know,
and
like it's their responsibility to manage that anger, not ours, right?
right, and but it's also our responsibility to manage our own, because just growing up and how we did, maybe we might still have a little part of ourselves that is punitive or is blaming or that way. And you can realize, gee, I can be angry and not do that. I can be compassionate at the same time as being angry. You know, it can be like wanting to work together on things. And you don't know, and it helps you to work on things if you really know how you feel and you're not just focused on it's all their fault, you know. So we can heal that side of ourselves too,
Mhm.
both sides, the inner child, and then maybe there's a a slightly narcissistic abuser,
Yeah.
and we might have those traits. And
Hmm.
it's important to look at that and recognize it, and then you can like do something about it.
Yes. Yeah, like those internalized parts of self that might be in there. The like the critic, or like, yeah, the perpetrator essentially. Like we switch from the victim to the perpetrators, and we have it all inside us, right? Like all human beings are capable of all these emotions. And I feel like that's like what ego really is sometimes. Like I feel like ego is that part of us that can express like that, you know, that feels separate from the world and is actually really just acting out of fear. Is what it is. It's just fear.
Yeah. A lot of times the more a person's a victim, the more an abuser side will come out sometimes. And it's part of introspection, your own inner work and your own compassion for yourself to recognize that and say, okay, all I have all these parts. And the more you understand about yourself, the more you can start to work on it.
Yes. Yes. And as we say when we're tapping, right? Like if you can say, I deeply and completely love and accept all the parts of myself, then you're doing pretty good, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Wow. Well, I have really, really enjoyed this conversation with you today. I'm so, so happy that you came to talk with us on this podcast. Um, I'm going to go ahead and wrap us up. And I would just say before we do wrap up, is there anything else you would like to say to anyone listening? Like one message you would want them to walk away with today?
Well, yeah, this was just a really great conversation for me too. It's not often that I get to talk about this stuff. Um, but I hope to more, that's kind of, as you look around, you can find eventually start to find other people that are also, sincerely interested in growth and compassion, having compassion as opposed to the opposite. Sometimes it seems like the whole world might be full of just everyone is a mirror of the abusers in your past. But the more you heal yourself, you'll stop attracting that. And then you'll start attracting healthy relationships.
Mm.
And so, yeah, just keep going because uh, you can change your whole world, you know.
Mm. Yes. Thank you. That's a beautiful message. I really appreciate it. All right, everyone. Well, you can go ahead and I'm going to put some information below in the description if you want to look up Bright Dawn Center for Oneness Buddhism, and hopefully you will check them out. And if you have any comments, we'd love to see your comments below as well. And thank you again, Kanon, for being here. And everyone, we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Nico.
Ease and no joy. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.